Alright, so I'm going to go over lighting in this lesson. So first, some basic terminology. We discussed this in a previous class, but I want to go over this again. So a lumen is a measurement of how much light is being put out by a lamp. Just to give you a sense of context, a 100 watt incandescent emits about 1600 lumens. Okay, so it's the amount of light being put out by a lamp. So it could be a linear fluorescent or an LED or whatever. But the amount of light being put out by that is the lumens. So illuminance or illumination is how bright a surface is. So that tells you how many watts per either square meter, or excuse me, lumens per square meter or lumens per square foot are hitting a surface. So it's how bright a surface is. And this is really common. It's like how bright, this is a really common measurement that lighting designers and energy auditors will use to see is it bright enough in the room, basically. Right, so a foot candle is 1 lumen per square foot, and then a lux is 1 lumen per square meter. Okay, so in a normal everyday classroom setting, you're probably looking at around 20 to 50 foot candles, to give you some context. And 20 to 50 foot candles is about 200 to 500 lux. Okay, so it's basically about 10 lux per foot candle. So that tells you how bright a surface is. That's illuminance or illumination. Luminous efficacy tells you it's kind of like the efficiency equivalent of a light, and that is the lumens. It's measured in lumens per watt. So you can sort of imagine if you have a really high luminous efficacy, that means you're getting a lot of light per watt, and so that means you're basically getting more bang for your buck. So it's like having a more efficient light. Like an LED has a really high luminous efficacy compared to an incandescent. Okay, so those are the main terms that I want you to know. Again, just to give you a sense of scale, you have a 100 watt. Over here is your lumen chart, typical lumens, right? So like with if you want 800 lumens, it's about a 9 to 10 watt LED, about a 13 to 14 watt CFL, or about a 60 watt incandescent. Or as you can see here, 100 watt incandescent, as I said, it's like 1600 lumens. In order to get the same amount of light, okay, as a 100 watt light bulb, you can get the same amount of light, which is measured in lumens, with a 16 to 18 watt LED. So this is why LEDs are so great. You get the same output for much less input. So the luminous efficacy, as you can imagine, would be about 5 times as high as an incandescent. And there's a lot of other considerations to make as well, but this is sort of just a basic introduction. So you do want to be careful when you're doing a lighting audit and you're making recommendations to make upgrades. So here's on the right is a typical T8 fluorescent tube. You can see this is 32 watts. And this is the one on the left is an LED replacement for T8. So you can just plug and play, like pop out the T8, pop the LED right in, it should work. But you have to be a little bit careful, because even though the wattage is much lower, so you can see this is 32 watts versus 15 watts, the lumen output of the LED is a little bit lower, right? So you're actually a good bit lower, so 1800 lumens versus 2600 lumens. So whenever you're making a lighting replacement, you do want to look at the spec sheet. You do want to check not only the size of the lamp, but also the color temperature, but the lumen output is important too. There are some other considerations. It's not quite so simple because the directionality of the light. So if for example, with the T8, if the light's being it's going in all directions, right? So some of the light's going to go up, and then so you may lose some of that light, right? Because it's not going down toward where you want it to go. Now you have reflectors and everything in the fixtures, but you do have to be a little bit careful that just because it's a lower lumen output, it can actually appear just about as bright. But you do want to be careful and try to match up your lumen output as much as possible. Okay. And one of the main reasons we want to do a lumen analysis is because different applications require different light levels. Okay, so here's a chart that shows the suggested range of lux given different activities. Right, so if you're outside, it's in a parking lot or whatever, like you just need enough light to be able to see, to see what's going on. Just doesn't want to, you don't want it to be dark, right? So that's really dim, like 20 to 50 lux. That's like 2 to 5 foot candles. That's pretty dark. And then as you, different tasks require different light levels, right? So if we're up here doing like office work or classroom work, we shoot about 250 lux. If you need to see like really detailed, like you're doing mechanical work or an operating room, you need a lot more light, as you can imagine. If it's something that requires, really high visual acuity, a lot of concentration, extended period of time, right, you might even need more light than that. The point is that when one of the things that energy managers do is they analyze light levels in a building to make sure that it's the right brightness. And if it's too bright, it's uncomfortable. It can cause discomfort. It can reduce your productivity, give people headaches. Too dim, again, same thing. Like you're squinting, you're sort of like really straining your eyes, and that is also exhausting. It's bad for productivity. It's bad for mood and all kinds of stuff. So lighting levels do have a major impact on what you're doing in a building. So it's important to consider that. Also, obviously, if you have too much lighting, that means you're overusing your energy. So we want to kind of hit that sweet spot where people have enough light and you're not overusing your energy, your lighting energy. You should jot down the IES, or Illuminating Engineering Society. So IES, they're sort of like the main body that provides recommended light levels. So if you ever see IES, it's in the energy field or the lighting field, it's with Illuminating Engineering Society, excuse me. And you can see here in a classroom, right, we should be probably in the 15 at the low end. This is just for reading and writing, but you probably don't want to be down at 15. So probably at least 20, 30, 40 would be good. If you're doing like a lab where you really have to see what you're doing, it's not just reading and writing, you might want to have a little more brightness. Okay, so for our purposes, now if you're just in a lecture hall and you're just listening to somebody talk, it can be pretty dim. So we took light levels in the classroom, and I wanted to sort of match it up and see how we did in terms of the appropriateness of light levels. And so this is what you would normally do when you perform a lighting analysis, is you would go systematically throughout the room. You take light level readings with your light meter, okay? And you take them every so many feet, and you kind of create this picture of the light levels, the pattern throughout the room. So you can see here, we should be at least 15 at the bare minimum. So we do meet that everywhere in the classroom, except in that back right corner, which is kind of like shaded by some of the cabinetry back there. So that's a little bit under the recommended levels. All of the others, it looks like we're in pretty good shape. I mean, it's a little dim up here near the front of the room, a little bit dim on the side. If we open up the blinds, remember the windows are over here, I'm sure that these light levels would improve. But you can see we're pretty good shape, mostly in the mid-20s to the 30s. And so this is what you would be a little more systematic about this, and you would go through and you'd say, well, you'd sort of log like there's a little bit dim over here, and you could make a recommendation. Maybe we need some spotlighting over here. Back here you should probably have an additional light on if there are students working back there. But that's how you would perform a lighting analysis, and hopefully that sort of makes sense that you have these recommended light levels, and if these numbers were in like the 50s, you'd be like, you know, it's okay, but it's a little bit bright. But if we're down in like the 5, 4, 3 foot candles, you know that that's too dim, and you would sense it, you know, just by visually. But it's nice to have the light meter to put a really solid number behind it. Okay, so that's it for the light level lesson, and actually that's it for all the content for the class.